Hey everyone! Yay! We're not a hard act to follow, so no pressure. We're feeling really comfortable here that we can engage you with, but let's give it a try. So anybody that doesn't know who's free to bid, I'll just give like a really quick, kind of recap of who we are before I introduce these wonderful people that are sitting with me. So I founded Free the Bid in September 2016. Our goal was to really break the systemic problem of hiring in the advertising world. As we know, there's literally less than probably around 6% of all commercials are directed by women. The average consumer is exposed to it's an estimated number, but between 3,000 and 10,000 advertising and marketing messages a day. And when you think about the fact that most of them are being created and directed by male, not to mention usually white male, not to mention usually alpha males, then you kind of get a picture of why we look the way we look as a society, the dynamics, the problems, the identity issues, the eating disorders. And I can go on forever about race and about other marginalized communities that don't fit into those gender stereotypes. So that's why we're all here. And when I started Free the Bid, the idea was to get brands to have a woman director bid on every triple bid commercial. And by that, giving them the opportunity to break into the industry, we had tremendous success with brands like HP, who often used to visit here in the past years, who went from 0% women directors to 59% women directors in a period of 16 months, all directors from our database. And this year we came back to Cannes to launch Free the Work, which is a talent discovery service. If you can imagine, Spotify meets IMDb with some Instagram in it, and it's all for us. It's all for women and underrepresented creators. And our mission is to go beyond women into trans-identifying, non-binary individuals, people of color. So this is why we're here. And I wanted today to talk to some of the people that support us. Our founders, our founding partners that joined us are P&G, Facebook, Amazon, AT&T, and Verizon joined us as guardians. So they're going to be committed to us in the next 3 years to take it globally. We're already in 20 countries. And today I have Stephanie Robertson, who's the brand director of North America, Olay. Yes. And I wanted to kind of ask you if you can talk specifically about, the implementation of Free the Bid at the brand level, and what has your experience been trying to do that?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for letting me be a part of this. And I think this is such an important conversation to have. I work on Olay Skincare. Hello, Olay Skincare in the house. Yes. This, I think, is a choice by P&G from our leadership down. First, many of you have probably heard from Mark Pritchard. He's set a tone and an example and, quite frankly, a mandate that P&G be a leader in this space, being more inclusive of who do we have actually helping to craft the stories that our brands reflect out to consumers. But within that, on the Olay skincare business, we've actually had several projects where we've made intentional choices that our leaders will be female. Because what's more personal than your skin and your skincare, and the way women are reflected in beauty, I think, can actually lead how we change society and the way women are reflected in society. What better place to do that than beauty, and what better brand than Olay? And so I have had the honor to work on several projects, like Olay Face Anything, which we launched last year, September. We did that with Alma Asante, who actually is one of your ambassadors.
True.
And this was a real definitive story for us to talk about how women have been defined as too something. Too loud, too outspoken. She thinks she's too cute. She's too emotional. And I think a part of that's because we've had alpha male representation of women. Women are constantly judging themselves. Am I fitting the box or not? And we wanted to tell a story that you don't have to fit the box. We cross out that too. Fully embrace who you are. And through that, your gifts and talents will shine. And so what we've made some intentional choices with Alma and others to make sure our directors are female. Our leadership is female. Nearly 80% of the leaders of our projects are female. Our crews are up to 65% female. These are intentional choices. And I'm just blessed to have leaders like my boss in the back there, Chris Hired. He asked the question, why not? And since we are in positions and opportunity, we have the position and the authority and the power to actually make these decisions. While we're here, we're going to make these decisions and push the narrative forward.
That's incredible. What do you think? What else do you think brands can be doing, or sort of, I guess, implementing in order to speak better to women, in order to make sure that when they do advertise for women, we know that, first of all, and you heard it here before, I'm sure many times, 85% of purchasing decisions are made by women. And we're not talking about just, hygiene products as they would like to think sometimes. We're talking about cars and computers and technology and everything like that, right? So what can we do, because women feel like that they're not being represented and they're not being spoken to correctly? Do you think that putting women behind the camera, putting underrepresented creators helps defining those stories and speaking better to women?
Yeah, it all starts for us with the consumer. And the consumer needs to be in the room. And so it starts with, how do we make sure we understand the consumer, what her needs are, how we're reflecting that authentically in her words, in her voice. For me as an employee of Procter & Gamble, I also take it seriously that as a leader, I'm in the room to make sure that my experience can get reflected in the work that I do. So I think from a brand and company standpoint, it's, do we have the right leaders in the room? Are we hiring the right people to reflect the consumers that we want to serve? And then for consumers, I think they have choice. Yeah. They have choice to, buy brands that reflect them. And so I think those are some of the moves I think are happening that are making that a little bit easier than it used to be.
100%. And also for consumers, I feel like we are growing. We're doing a really good job in raising the consciousness about the fact that what we're seeing in front of the camera in terms of diversity, how women look, how do they show up in front of the camera, and what we make them or expect them to do in front of the camera is changing. But we don't often speak enough about who's behind the camera, who's asking them to do those things, right? And how do we make sure that we don't actually have a group of 12 creatives who are all men going out and kind of imposing a certain story, so we put it in front of the camera and then it sort of feels really, something is not authentic about it, and the consumer can really feel that on some level, right? So I think that doing the work of understanding who's behind the camera is really important. And to seg to Mark here, Mark Tilghman, who's a senior director of ANA's See Hers movement, which is the reason we're all here in many ways, is a great example of an initiative that really tackles how women are represented and seen. And we started on a journey with you that I'm really, actually have to say, started here. The first time you and me spoke, when I came to you and I said, we have to do something to also see if there's any connection, because you have such a great measurement with the GEM score of how women are represented and how they respond to it. I was like, we have to check if this is a myth. Like, is there really a connection between the fact that when there's a woman behind the camera, there's better representation of the women in front of the camera? So we started a journey to analyze commercial work with GEM. And before we get into what were the results, can you kind of explain to us a little bit what is the GEM score? What is the study?
Right. So See Her is a movement of advertisers that brings brands together and is part of the ANA. And as the ANA, we decided that we wanted to make data a really important piece of everything that we do, so that we could measure and track against progress. We set a goal to make a 20% change in the industry by 2020, but we needed a measure to track that. We created that measure, and by the way, we're at over 30% change in the industry since 2016 when we started. And we're going to keep going because it needs more. So we created a measure called GEM, the Gender Equality Measure, because you treasure what you measure. and it creates it absolutely. You respect what you inspect. I'll stop. But then it creates just four simple characteristics. The overall, how a woman is presented in the ad, is she treated respectfully, inappropriately, and is she a positive role model? So these four things are weighted equally. We measure for females, we measure for men. We can compare so that there's gender equality in how brands are doing their work. We have to date scored over 75,000 ads with
Wow.
GEM scores.
That's amazing.
Largest gender equality study in history. And so then the notion was, we wonder if this idea of female directors behind the camera, which intuitively would say, yes, women will produce better GEM scoring ads, but you don't know. And you have to trust the data. You have to do the work. And I was a little bit on pins and needles because the test
when we were prepping, we're like, we're taking a chance here because we might get like really depressing results and come to Ken and say, well, I guess it was really a false theory.
But fortunately, it wasn't that way at all. In fact, what the study showed was that, first of all, we took it, randomized the data, we chose ads. The first pass, we chose some of the directors you gave us, and the results were amazing because your directors maybe are better than average. But we thought, okay, that's directionally great, but now we need to make sure that it's actually, scientifically sound. So then we did a random study over 288 ads. 17% of them were female-directed. The rest were male-directed, which almost reflects the market. And we had over 43,000.
More like 7% is in the market. So
I
it's
know.
like a generous 10% more, but we'll take it.
And over 43,000 consumers responded and helped us evaluate these.
Wow, 43,000.
43,000 interviews done. And so what we found was two things. First of all, 89% of the female-directed spots were above average. GEM scores an index, so it was 100 plus, versus 72% of the male directed ads were GEM plus, or 100% plus. And overall, what we found was that the female GEM score was 4 points on average higher by a female director than a male director. Very significant.
So that's incredible. And I got to ask something that I think is important to say, which is we kind of always make the assumption that a lot of times, and this study proves it, that when men are behind the camera, women are being objectified often or just presented in very stereotypical gender roles that don't represent them and limit them. I'm going to ask something and tell me what's the verdict, but is there worse representation of men when women are behind the camera? Because I want to know if when we put a woman director behind the camera, men get represented not as well.
Great question. Actually, there is no statistical difference in how females directors' GEM scores are for men. In fact, it's on average 2 points higher. So
that's huge to me.
Right.
Thank you.
The 2 points higher is like not statistically valid. So what you can say is that female directors on average do create better portrayals of women and not at the expense of the portrayal of men.
Thank you. That's huge, everybody. Just so you know, because this is really we really are at a junction, because what I'm realizing more and more the more I do it is that in many ways women suffer a lot when men are behind the camera. But if we think about the fact that, like I said before, all of these marketing messages are being directed by men, and we always think about, oh, who's paying the price? Only women. Well, I don't know. What about little boys that only see themselves through the eyes of men? What about men in general that never gets to see themselves through the eyes of the women in their lives, who see parts of them that men maybe don't see, and maybe all of those images of men that are really only speaking to ambition sometimes and heroism, and a lot of tough images that don't allow them to deal with their emotions, and all of the mental health issues we're seeing that men are having. maybe that has to do with the fact that they don't get reflected through women's eyes at all. So that's just really wonderful to hear that when women are behind the camera, there's something to be done with that. I wanted to kind of ask you another question because our mission, like I said, is really to grow beyond women and represent and highlight the work of, like I said, trans-identifying, non-binary, and other underrepresented creators. What is the next evolution of this study? You know, is it including more identities beyond women? Is there anything that you're thinking about in terms of where you're going into?
Yeah. So the first was a gen pop study, and we're definitely going to move next into ethnicities, and then further and further across the spectrum. But you have to start someplace, and you have to start with really solid.
We started
data.
with women too.
You start there, and you prove out. Let the data prove it out over time. But the short answer is yes, absolutely. We are committed to that path.
Thank you so much. So I want to just kind of talk a little bit, just to wrap up and to say a little bit about what is Free the Work. I know like there's a lot of press around it. We don't really have good screens here to show you our website, but I wanted to kind of explain a little bit what it is. And I think that one of the most important things to know about it, other than we really wish you would go on the website and ask for an invite and join us so you could start searching the database and curating your own lists, is that it's really taking the talent discovery service idea beyond this stagnant IMDb, if you may, notion where you go on a database, you look for talent, and you look for a name that you know, and you check what they did, what were their credits, but you never discover anything outside of it, because if you don't know the name, you can't find the person. So this is a database that is powered by machine learning. We all use services like apps and all sorts of websites in order to discover our new favorite song, and we go on Spotify and get like a weekly discovery, right, like playlist, and we find a new restaurant or a new film we want to watch. My dream is, and our dream is, that we bring into talent discovery the same urgency and innovation that we bring into that. There's no reason that we can find, where to get our best breakfast, and we can't go on and find and say, oh, there's no talent out there. We're just stuck with this narrative that is being told again and again by the same talent, because we can't find other talent, and we have to do shadowing, and we have to do workshops. No, there is talent. They're out there. They're ready to go. And we would be really happy if you went on Free the Work and started to get acquainted with it. If you can think of, like I said, Spotify meets IMDb Pro and Instagram social networking, and you can follow filmmakers, get recommendations, break your echo chamber, and really discover and join a new renaissance of creativity. So thank you so much for listening, and we hope you join us in our new kind of evolution. And thank you so much for this study and for talking to us. Thank you.